Video games! They're fun, huh? Today's games can be full of bombastic action, incredible interactive set pieces, and interesting and complex mechanics. They have become artistic and technical marvels. How did we get here? To answer that question, let's take things all the way back to biblical times, 1985. The 80s were a magical time. In 1985, Ronald Reagan began his second term in office. New Coke was introduced, which people didn't like, but are also now weirdly nostalgia for thanks to Stranger Things. Calvin and Hobbes debuted, and Bobby Knight threw his chair across the basketball court, which isn't something a head coach should do. Who would have thought? 1985 was peak 80s. We saw such wonderful movies like Back to the Future, The Breakfast Club, The Goonies, The Color Purple, Commando, Weird Science, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and Teen Wolf. Here's a fun fact. In this same year, Emilio Estevez, Ali Sheedy, and Judd Nelson were not in one, but two movies together about a group of people of a specific age figuring out life. Now, what's ironic here is they played both high schoolers and early 20-somethings in the same year in two different movies. Only one was a hit, though. The other was named after a celestial phenomenon regarded as a religious experience by sailors way back when. This year was also the year the Nintendo Entertainment System hit America, and this was no easy feat back then. The home console market crashed just a couple years prior, and retailers were reluctant to sell video games. Consumers were just as trepidatious to buy. Atari, Activision, and others really screwed the pooch on this one, but Nintendo was adamant about getting into the North American market. And they also had a game in the works for 1985 that would come out almost simultaneously with the NES. A game that would change the shape of the video game market and capture the minds and imaginations of children everywhere. This story has been done to death. I don't know how to add anything new to it, to be honest. So I'll just recap it shortly and succinctly for you kind folks, so you don't have to completely suffer through another amateur YouTuber's machinations on the origin of a gaming powerhouse. Mario's original conception was to be a milquetoast character that can be inserted into just about any game. He was supposed to be like Homer Simpson, could and would have about every job under the sun.
You know, I've had a lot of jobs. Boxer, mascot, astronaut, imitation Krusty, baby proofer, trucker, hippie, plow driver, food critic, conceptual artist, grease salesman, carny, mayor, grifter, bodyguard for the mayor, country western manager, garbage commissioner, mountain climber, farmer, inventor, smithers, poochie, celebrity assistant, power plant worker, fortune cookie writer, beer baron, quickie mart clerk, homophobe, and missionary.
He got his start as a carpenter in Donkey Kong, became a plumber in Mario Brothers, and was a construction worker in Wrecking Crew. It's the plumber job that obviously would finally stick, though I don't know if we've ever really seen him do much plumbing. Which brings us to 1985. The Famicom in Japan was starting to show its age, and the American market needed a significant boost to appeal to consumers who were burned by the game crash. The Japanese Famicom was about to get the disk system, which would be a significant upgrade to the 8-bit hardware. Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator of Donkey Kong, was tasked with creating a swan song game on cartridge to show just exactly what could be done on the hardware. This could then point to what will be done with the added space the disk system will bring. It was to be a sign of the grand adventures to come in home console gaming. This wouldn't be the swan song to cartridges. The disk system never came out here in America, obviously, and cartridge tech caught up with the disk tech at the time and made it obsolete for everyone, including us. Plus, the peripheral just didn't catch on in Japan like Nintendo had hoped, so most games on the NES at the time were single board levels, a relic of the arcade era. Like Donkey Kong, with very little scrolling, if any at all. You'd finish a level and then move on to the next. Like Donkey Kong! And the object of each game was chasing a high score. Hey, like Donkey Kong! Nintendo aimed to change that. They wanted to show that the Famicom and the NES were more than just at-home arcade machines, especially since arcade games were starting to look better than Nintendo games, because they weren't tied to a specific hardware requirement. Miyamoto was tasked with just not creating a fun game, but an epic journey. Enter Super Mario Bros. While scoring was a component, it was no longer the goal. The goal was rescuing the princess. Hey, like Donkey Kong! But this time there was a journey in finding her and defeating her capturer. It wasn't just going to be the same 3 boards recycled over and over again until either you got a game over or you reached the kill screen of the arcade cabinet. Along the way were secrets to find, obstacles to overcome, and new and exciting enemies to defeat as you got closer to Bowser's castle. When people got their hands on Super Mario Bros., it blew their minds. It was, to put it in professional technical terms, awesome sauce. Kids gravitated towards this. This made the NES a must-have item, largely in thanks to Nintendo's simplistic approach to game design. Super Mario Bros. Is built primarily around one core idea: jumping. And I know there's been a ton of videos done to death about this, but just bear with me. This popularized the platforming game genre, but back then Nintendo referred to Mario as an athletic game. Everything in the game is designed around Mario's jump, from obstacles to enemies to power-ups. Different enemies will react differently to your jump, forcing you to reassess how you approach each enemy. And different power-ups will either augment your jump, like giving you the ability to smash bricks with the Super Mushroom, or change how you use your jump, like the Fire Flower or Starman, which changes how you can interact and defeat enemies. The movement physics are also tailor-made to make jumping feel good. Mario has weight and inertia, but he's also quick and nimble. He moves how you would expect and like him to move, unlike in previous outings, like Donkey Kong, where his movement is pretty stiff and rigid. It doesn't feel good. This game, on the other hand, feels good. It has crunch, kind of like a Dorito. And have you ever had store-brand Doritos? They taste the same, but they don't feel or crunch the same. Doritos have a certain texture to them that don't just make them taste good, but feel good to eat. They're crunchy. Doritos just aren't made, they're engineered. That's not a good way to view your food products. Likewise, Mario is also crunchy. He's not just easy to control, he feels good to control. And when you get into a groove, the game can have a flow, man. I mean, watch a speedrunner run this game. It even feels good to watch someone play this game. Miyamoto's goal in designing this game was to make sure it was accessible, and it shows. But it's not just the simplicity of design, but also the approach to level design and difficulty curve. Super Mario Bros. Starts off simple, with safety nets to get you used to the controls, and only introducing 2 types of enemies at first. With each level, something new is introduced, a new enemy, a new variety of a known enemy, or different types of obstacles. The game is hardly overwhelming, as the difficulty slowly curves up rather than spiking drastically. You are given time to master the initial challenges before something new is thrown at you. This also keeps the game interesting and engaging. With each new level, there is always something new to discover. Add in the secrets for you to find to get extra lives or warp to other levels.
Baby, you got a stew going.
Yes, that's fine.
While arcade-like mechanics were still a part of the game, like scoring and the live system, this wasn't just a home console port of an arcade game. This was something different. It was an epic journey, a grand adventure with enemies to defeat, secrets to find, and a princess to rescue. The game sold 40 million copies. It was obvious that a sequel was going to be made. To say Super Mario Bros. Was a huge success would be a severe understatement. It wasn't even a year later that Nintendo released the sequel, Super Mario Bros. 2. Wait, that's not Super Mario Bros. 2, that's, I don't know. Hang on. Okay. Hang on, I can't just, this isn't right. I got the wrong year. It's the wrong year, everybody. Sorry about that. It's the wrong year. It's the wrong year. This is a Super Mario Bros. 2 we all know and some love. But this isn't the same Super Mario Bros. 2 that came out in Japan 2 years earlier. It's actually a completely different game, obviously. I know we've all heard the story, and there are other YouTubers that have covered it more thoroughly than I. We won't get into the nitty-gritty details here because that's not the point of this. But at the same time, it can't discuss how Super Mario Bros. 2 helped define a Mario game without going briefly into how it came to be. So let's go back to 1986. Super Mario Bros. Was a hit, and very quickly afterward, the development team that created the NES game went to work creating an arcade version called Versus Super Mario Bros. Being an arcade game, it had to eat quarters, so the team took some of the levels they had from the original and remixed them to make them harder, and then created brand new levels as well that were difficult challenges. They had so much fun doing this, when they finished, they took this approach to developing Super Mario Bros. 2. They kept the graphics mostly the same as the first. They did a bit to kind of freshen them up, but the bulk of their time was spent on designing new challenging levels, and they were indeed challenging. Not even a year after Super Mario Bros. Came out, Super Mario Bros. 2 was released in Japan. Now, contrary to popular belief, Nintendo HQ didn't think this game was too difficult for American audiences. They didn't look down their noses and say, "Those American slobs, they will never have an appreciation or the patience to develop the skills to rise to the challenge that is Super Mario Bros. 2. Give them something else instead. Let them eat cake." In all actuality, this was Nintendo of America's call. Howard Phillips was working away at Nintendo of America. His job was to receive the games from Japan, play them, and evaluate them, and then decide which ones to localize for the American market. In one shipment, with no forward warning or notice, he found a copy of Super Mario Bros. 2 in with some other games for him to evaluate. He immediately plugged it in and played it, and his reaction was, eh. The game was difficult, very difficult, but it wasn't just the difficulty that perturbed Howard, it also seemed mean-spirited with gotcha moments and leaps of faith. It didn't seem to have that care of slow difficulty escalation that the previous game had. You were dropped right into the thick of it. Howard Phillips is even quoted as saying, "As I continued to play, I found that Super Mario Bros. 2 asked me again and again to take a leap of faith, and each of those leaps resulted in my immediate death." This was not a fun game to play, it was punishment. Undeserved punishment. I put down my controller, astonished that Mr. Miyamoto had chosen to design such a painful game. Notice the wording there. He did not call it a bad game, but a painful game. There's a difference. Because there is an audience for such a game. But the difficulty level was going to make it a hard sell. That and it looked way too similar to the first Super Mario Bros. There's very little improvement to the graphics. Nintendo of America was still getting their foothold in the market after the video game crash. This game probably wouldn't be the best one to release as a follow-up to the juggernaut that was Super Mario Bros. They wisely decided not to release it stateside. But they had to release something, and soon. Super Mario Bros. Was huge, and not having a sequel would be insane, especially with Super Mario Bros. 3 on the horizon. You can't just skip Super Mario Bros. 2, it'd create confusion. So they politely asked Nintendo to adapt another game that felt like a Mario game into a proper Mario game. This is where Doki Doki Panic comes into the picture. This game was made in partnership with a Japanese TV network called Fuji Television Network. The game was made to promote their big summer TV festival. The playable characters were mascots created by Fuji Television Network to be part of the big event. The game was a promotional tie-in. While the playable characters were all owned by Fuji, everything else was owned by Nintendo. And even though Miyamoto wasn't too personally involved in development, he did guide it, and wanted the game to have a Mario feel. This made it an easy choice to retrofit into a Mario game. Oh my gosh, did you hear that? All right, hang on, let me play this back again here. The Shy Guys scream when you pick them up and throw them. They have two distinct screams, one for when you pick him up, and another scream for when you throw him. What? Take the four main characters and transform them into Mario, Luigi, Toad, and Peach. Bam! Mario game made. Put a sticker on it and ship it out. In 1988, 2 years after the Japanese release of Super Mario Bros. 2, this alternate version of Super Mario Bros. 2 came out in America. Looking back over the catalog of Mario games, this game, while feeling like a Mario game, definitely feels very out of place. Though it did add new and interesting ideas. There are now vertical sections, turning the jump into a tool to be used for ascending and climbing, and not just forward traversal. Each character also has different jump physics. Mario is an all-around average jumper, Luigi's jump is high and floaty, Peach can hover, and Toad can go fast but can't jump as high as the others, making him jump farther instead. These character-specific movement physics would be used in the future, even though we wouldn't have Peach as a playable character again until 2013 in Super Mario 3D World, and Luigi would be used sparingly and sporadically in this way as well. Other than the individual jump physics and the verticality, Super Mario Bros. 2, the USA version, doesn't add anything else to the definition of a Mario game. It feels like a Mario game, but doesn't at the same time. Most of its ideas are tossed aside, not really to be used again. It's this last Mario game on the NES that would come to define what a Super Mario game will forever be. By the turn of the decade, the Nintendo Entertainment System was becoming old news. By the end of the 80s, competitors were encroaching on Nintendo's doorstep. The PC Engine and Sega Mega Drive came out in Japan in 1987 and 1988 respectively. They were 16-bit consoles supporting better graphics and bigger games. They quickly reached American shores in 1988 and 1989 as a TurboGrafx-16 and the Sega Genesis. Nintendo now needed to play catch-up and started work on developing their own 16-bit console. But it was going to be a couple years behind the other guys, so they needed to show why they were still the king of video games. Thus comes the Nintendo Entertainment System's magnus opus.
Super Mario Brothers 3!
Released in 1988 in Japan, it wouldn't come to America until February of 1990. That's because Super Mario Bros. 2 just released in 1988 here in the States. And through all of 1989, Nintendo of America was slowly ramping up the hype of the third game, sprinkling mentions of it here and there in issues of Nintendo Power, and showing first footage of gameplay in the Hollywood movie The Wizard. Fun fact, Fred Savage was the lead in this movie, and he played a character named Corey. His younger brother, Ben Savage, would get the lead role of Corey Matthews in the hit TGIF series Boy Meets World. Both brothers have played characters named Corey in their childhood. The hype of this game was off the charts. Even though the other guys had bigger and better consoles with more power, Nintendo showed that they were still the reigning champs. Everything Super Mario Bros. Did back in 1985, Super Mario Bros. 3 did it better. So much better. The journey was more epic, the power-ups were more powerful, the platforming is a perfect mix of challenging and fun. It was superb. This is the game that would become the definition of a Mario game. Levels no longer came in an exact sequential order. Each world was now represented by a world map, giving you a greater context to your journey. And each world was themed: grassland, desert, sky, water, pipe maze, giant land, dark world. A lot of these themes would go on to become Mario staples, and even platforming staples. Some levels could be chosen or completely bypassed if you wanted. But this meant you would miss out on an item shop that would give you a useful power-up to store for later. And power-ups could be given to Mario before he entered a level from a bank at the bottom of the screen. This way you could make sure you entered a level with the right ability equipped to give yourself an advantage. This little bank would also house items that could help you in the overworld maps, such as skipping levels, warping to different worlds, or putting roaming enemies to sleep. Or even using a hammer to smash rocks and find shortcuts through the map. More enemies were introduced, bosses and sub-bosses were added. The final fight with Bowser took the jump mechanic and reversed it. While every other boss you had to jump on to defeat, Bowser was trying to jump on you, and you had to exploit that to defeat him. The level design is where this game truly shines. Some levels have secrets up in the air for you to jump up and fly to get extra coins or extra lives. Other levels scroll slowly, forcing you to slow down, or to use your jump to keep platforms from falling out from under you as you wait for the next bit of safety to scroll into view. Other levels scroll quickly, forcing you to be quick and nimble. Some levels have a more vertical nature and wrap around themselves in a maze-like structure. Not every water level is created the same either. They're no longer exclusively underwater swimming levels. Some now have the water as a ground, with platforms rising and falling in and out of the water. If you fall in, it's not an instant death by drowning. You can swim to safety, hopefully. Big Bertha here is a hungry fish waiting to gobble you up like Jonah the second you fall in. And sometimes she can get impatient and jump out of the water to try and eat you for a delicious snack. The second you may get bored or tired of a theme or challenge, Super Mario Bros. 3 throws something else your way to test your platforming skills. The levels are for the most part quick and short, but still a fun challenge. Super Mario Bros. Established the core competencies of a Mario game. Super Mario Bros. 3 established the look and feel of a Mario game. At the core of all of it is his jump. Nintendo, even back in the early days of game design, understood how much variety they can get out of one simple idea if the concept is taken to the very limits of their imagination. It starts with a very simple premise. What if your main tool, your main skill at your disposal in completing your adventure was just that, the jump? How would the levels be laid out? How would enemies work? How could we turn it on its head? How many times can we turn this idea on its head? What more can we do that we may not have even thought about? What's absolutely brilliant about Super Mario Bros. And Super Mario Bros. 3 is the amount of abilities and power-ups that are available to you. You can become big with Super Mario, shoot fireballs with Fire Flower Mario, fly, float, and tail whip with Tanuki Mario, sling hammers with Hammer Brother Mario, swim and hop with Frog Mario, become an invulnerable Rainbow Man monster with Starman Mario. All these tools are at your disposal, but none of them are needed to finish the game. You can be ordinary, teeny tiny, itty bitty, toddler mustached Mario the whole time. The only thing you need to do to complete your adventure is jump. Except for a couple levels where you do need to have the Tanuki Leaf, but I stand by my statement.